Hi, welcome back. In this quick tutorial, we'll draw a leaf with tiny dewdrops using graphite pencils. It's easy, calming, and perfect if you're just starting out. So let's get started. As always, these are the art supplies I'm going to use for this drawing, and you can pause the video right here to note them down. I'm using this 250 GSM paper from my ordinary smooth surface sketchbook, which is available in almost all the art stores or stationeries around the world. So you don't have to use any fancy paper for this specific drawing. And the drawing portion area is 7 x 7 inches. I drew the outline using the grid method, and you can find the detailed step-by-step process from making the grid to outlining on my Patreon profile. Link is in the description. Before moving on to shading the background, I'm slightly darkening some of the key outline strokes we just made. This prevents them from fading or getting lost during blending. Now let's jump into the background shading. For that, I'm going to turn my 3B graphite pencil into powder. I'm doing this by rubbing the pencil against a metal scraper, which quickly turns the graphite into a soft powder. You can also use sandpaper or any rough surface if you don't have a scraper. This powdered graphite will help us get smooth, even shading in the background with very little effort. And before moving further, let's mask the edges of the drawing paper using a masking tape to prevent graphite from spilling over the borders. Okay, so let's start blending the graphite powder. For this, I'm using a larger dry brush and gently moving my hand in small circular motions. This technique helps lay the powder softly onto the paper, allowing the graphite to settle smoothly without any harsh lines or streaks. Circular motions are incredibly helpful when you want to build a soft, seamless base, because instead of dragging the graphite in one direction, you're gently massaging it into the texture of the paper from all angles, giving you a beautiful, even finish. I'm focusing more on specific portions where I want the tone to be intense, and then using the leftover powder on the brush to lightly shade the areas that need to stay subtle. I go over the entire background like this, using the same layering technique to create a soft, blurry base that doesn't distract from the leaf itself. Now for the bottom portion of the background, I want a deeper tone to add a nice contrast and depth to the composition. To do this, I'm switching to an 8B graphite pencil and gently scraping it against the edge of my metal scraper to turn it into a rich, dark powder. I place this powder directly over the bottom portion of the background and start blending it the same way, in small circular motions, using a bigger dry brush. This creates a smooth transition between the darker and lighter parts of the background. And by the way, you can get access to our premium content and support this channel through Patreon. You can sign up through different membership levels and get access to all the outline and grid references, etc. We have an ever-growing library of hundreds of exclusive and real-time tutorials, and you will also get access to 4 new tutorials every month. You can also post your artworks in our active community of patrons and participate in our weekly critique sessions where I give my honest and positive critiques on your artworks, so you can improve your skills and get better with your drawing. Visit the link in description and become a premium member today. It has always been my goal to provide free tutorials and information on drawing and art-related tools to the general public. And keeping with that theme, I like to thank all these incredible individuals who backed our channel on Patreon last month. Their generous support enabled me to produce this free tutorial for all of you guys. To blend everything even more seamlessly, I'm now folding a soft tissue paper like this. Just fold it neatly so you have a smooth, flat side to work with. I'm using that flat side to go over the entire background again, still using circular motions. First, I focus on the darker areas, pressing just enough to push the graphite deeper into the paper. Then I flip to a clean side of the tissue and gently go over the lighter areas. This is important because if the tissue still holds dark graphite, it could smudge or unintentionally darken the lighter parts. If you're aiming for that soft, dreamy, out-of-focus background look, where some areas are darker and others gently fade out, it's all about layering and blending slowly. Start with a mid-tone base using light graphite powder, then gradually add darker powder where needed. Always blend from dark to light, clean your blending tools in between, and take your time building it up in thin layers. This creates that perfect blurry depth, just like the way a camera lens captures something in the background while keeping the main subject crisp and clear. Okay, so now let's move on to the leaf detailing. As always, I'm starting by darkening the outline strokes we added earlier to make them more prominent. I'm using my 3B pencil for this, sharpened to a long rounded tip, and holding it at a lower angle as I move along the edge of the leaf. This grip and tip shape allow me to shade in a way that gives a sharp, defined edge on one side and a soft, blended finish on the other. It creates a natural gradient without needing any additional tools, which is perfect for organic forms like leaves. I continue shading along the entire bottom edge of the leaf, layering the graphite from above to get that subtle gradient. Wherever I see depth or shadow in the reference, I'm pressing slightly harder to darken those areas. Now, since the light source is hitting the left side of the leaf, I'm softening my pressure and shading that portion with a much lighter hand. This helps form a gentle base layer while keeping it bright where needed. One thing to remember here, try not to apply a dark base in spots where you want bright highlights later on. Once the area is covered in graphite, it becomes difficult to bring back that brightness, and rubbing over the same spot repeatedly can damage the tooth of your paper. That's why it's so important to plan your values in advance. Knowing exactly where shadows, mid-tones and highlights will go helps you build your layers intentionally, with minimal correction later. Now shifting to the right section of the leaf, since less light is hitting this side, I'm increasing the pressure slightly to create a richer, darker tone. Toward the tip of the leaf, I'm switching to my 8B pencil and adding more layers of graphite to build the required depth. While I'm at it, I'm also darkening and forming the 3D base inside the dewdrop resting on the leaf. Moving on to the smaller droplet at the very tip, I'm paying attention to the darker parts in the reference image and shading those first. This creates a strong foundation for the reflections we'll add later. Now that the 3D base is in place, it's time to blend it all out for a smooth finish. I'll be using a few different tools here to get the best results. First, I take a medium-sized dry brush and gently brush over the entire leaf. This helps settle the graphite into the texture of the paper. After that, I'm switching to a clean tissue paper and begin blending the same area using small circular motions. This step is great for evening out the tones and filling in any patchy spots. And just look at how soft and smooth it's already starting to look. For the more intricate details, I bring out my small blending stump and work in short back and forth motions. Blending stumps are ideal for precise blending. They reach into tight corners without smudging the surrounding areas. After blending, I noticed that a few sections looked slightly dull, so I'm going back in and adjusting the depth before continuing. You can skip this touch-up step if your drawing already looks how you want it to. Sometimes all it takes is a quick glance to know if your drawing is ready to move forward. Okay, so let's move on to the most exciting part, highlighting and detailing. I'm beginning with my kneaded eraser, shaping it into a soft round tip and gently dabbing it over the areas where I want to lift the graphite and bring out subtle highlights. I'm also sliding it lightly in the direction of the leaf's natural texture to create those soft, organic looking highlights. This process continues across the left section of the leaf where the light falls more strongly. I'm also adding this curved highlight right beneath the darker stroke to make it pop even more. Moving to the dewdrop, and I'm focusing on the bottom left side which catches the light. I'm gently lifting the excess graphite here to create a soft base for the highlight. Then I'm going back over the top portion of the leaf to achieve the required softer base highlight. For more defined highlights, I'm now switching to my Mono Zero eraser with a sharp tip. I'm tracing along the darker strokes we added earlier for the veins of the leaf. This combination of a clean, bright stroke right next to a dark one gives the illusion of form and dimension. It makes the veins appear as if they're rising gently from the surface, creating a natural 3D effect. I'm moving my hand in small back and forth motions while keeping the pressure high for the main veins. As I move upward, I'm reducing the pressure to keep the highlights soft and realistic. On the right edge of the leaf, I'm flicking the eraser gently to produce highlights that are brighter at one end and taper off softly at the other. Okay, so now I'm continuing building the texture by varying the intensity of highlights along other veins, depending on the area and direction of the lift. I'm also adjusting some of the previous highlights using the same shading and lifting method, and now I have started adding tiny dots across the surface to represent miniature droplets. I'm now using the flat tip of my Mono 0 to define the right side of the leaf even further. Now let's make the main highlights pop up even more, and for that I'm using my electric eraser and going carefully along the edge of the leaf. This tool creates bright, crisp lines that are hard to achieve otherwise. For the dewdrop, I'm adding a bright yet blended highlight on the top portion to give it that wet, glossy look. Just above the highlight I previously made with the Mono 0, I'm adding a soft curved stroke, and instantly it begins to glow. Next, I am shifting to the bottom portion of the droplet and started adding more intense highlights, shaping them to match the reflections in the reference image. Keep on relating to the reference image while working on such intricate details to avoid any unintentional mistakes or deformity. I'm also adding these tiny irregular dots to represent a miniature droplet resting on the leaf. Once again, I'm using my Mono 0 eraser and working over the veins to mimic the way a tiny droplet might reflect light as it rolls down. I'm keeping the pressure low here. I don't want these to overpower the rest of the drawing. Now I'm shifting to the left edge of the leaf, and here I'm using the same eraser with a sharp tip and flicking it gently to form highlights with thin tapered ends, just like the way we did earlier. While working along the veins, I'm increasing the pressure again to reinforce the 3D structure. I'm also adding in a few more tiny dots in between for extra water droplets. The left side of the leaf's tip catches more light, so I'm layering highlights using both the electric and Mono 0 erasers together to achieve that extra glow. Keep on adding these highlights across the rest of the leaf using the same technique we followed earlier. Now let's really make the tiny droplets stand out. And for that, I'm adding darker strokes and shadows within the droplets using my 8B pencil. When placed correctly, these deeper values create contrast around the highlights, giving the droplet its round, three-dimensional appearance. The trick is in the balance. Light needs dark to stand out, and dark needs light to feel grounded. I'm going back and forth between the pencil and erasers to adjust the details on each droplet until they feel just right. Now I move on to the droplet at the tip of the leaf, and I'm setting by gently lifting excess graphite from the lighter areas. It's important not to drag your eraser into the darker areas, as it will flatten the contrast and reduce the shiny, dimensional look we're aiming for. For the brightest parts, I'm switching back to the electric eraser and extending the earlier highlights, along with adding new ones where needed. I'm also fine-tuning the leaf portion in between the highlighting process to make sure everything flows together naturally. Coming back to the droplet, I'm using my flat-tip Mono 0 eraser with high pressure to brighten the base highlights. I'm using the flicking method here to create a smooth gradient, starting strong and letting the stroke fade gently. Harsh, blocky highlights can look unrealistic, so I'm softening the edges wherever necessary to maintain a natural glow. On the right side of the droplet, I'm reducing the pressure even more to create softer, faded reflections. Now to add a final shine, I'm going over the key highlights with the electric eraser one last time, but very carefully. Too many bright spots can make the drawing look overworked and visually confusing. Less is often more when it comes to realism. After refining the droplet, I'm making small adjustments to the leaf again, making sure everything feels balanced. Coming back to the droplet, and I'm going along its bottom edge with a B pencil to define the outline a bit more. And look how crisp and natural it has started to look. To create that glowing effect around the droplet, I'm dabbing my kneaded eraser over the bottom left portion, and then softly blend the edges into the background using a dry brush. I'm also dabbing it on some of the lighter areas in the background to brighten them up further. and blend them gently afterward for a seamless finish using a tissue paper. And with this last step, we are done with this super quick and easy leaf drawing. Creating these free tutorials needs a significant amount of time and energy. So if you found this one valuable, please show your support by liking the video. Your support keeps me inspired to bring you more creative content. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.